Good evening, everybody. This is December 18th, 2018, and a special meeting of the Board of Education, District 64. Tom, please take the roll.
Fred Sanchez.
Here.
Larry Riles.
Here.
Tom Soto's here. Anthony Borelli.
Here.
Rick Biaggi.
Here.
Mark Eggerman. And
hopefully we'll be here in a little bit.
And Bob Johnson.
Here. All right, tonight we have an abbreviated meeting. Abbreviated yet both eventful in its occurrence and dramatic in its importance. On Wednesday, December 12th, Dr. Heinz rendered her resignation as Superintendent of District 64 to take the reins of District 15, that of Palatine, the third largest elementary school district in Illinois. Second largest. I was on the board as president when last the board conducted a superintendent search and first met Dr. Heinz. The qualities of leadership, energy, communication, and continual improvement were the qualities that the board wanted then, and I suspect those that are equally wanted now. These are, in my mind, immutable in the character of a successful superintendent. I believe that I speak for the board in that I wish the best for Dr. Heinz for the future, and along with her help in obtaining a successor and continued quality management throughout her remaining days, we will hope to have an uneventful but busy end of the school year. Originally, with this busy season upon us, in my mind, the board was to consider this issue after the holidays. In discussion with various board members and Vice President Biaggi, I came to the conclusion that this issue is one of more immediate concern and believe that we should expedite this matter to gain as many options going forward as possible. As this is already December, we must be aware of the remaining pool of candidates for the position, and therefore the help and guidance of the search firm is critical to lead us through the maze of options, such as a temporary superintendent for the 1920 school year or conducting a full-blown interview process to have a new superintendent in place prior to the start of 2019. Each option has its pluses and minuses, and there may be other options available yet. This issue before the board impacts each and every one of us as board members, administration, staff, students, and the community. This is a decision that must be done right the first time, thus this discussion tonight to start the process. Prior to beginning the discussion, I do have on the agenda a short period of time at which the board, should it choose, may go into closed session under 5 Illinois Compiled Statute 122C1 to discuss the resignation and other positions that may be equally affected, all of which affect district function. It is my intention to only discuss the position of superintendent of the district and its ramifications. I have no intention of an individual performance discussion tonight, though we critically need to establish a date for one later this evening. I've made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I will need a voice vote. Any discussion or comments?
I'm not exactly sure what the substance of the closed session will be. So I'm a no vote unless I hear that there's some specific reason why we're going in to do this right now. I don't know that there's anything I would say that shouldn't be said in open session, but I'm certainly willing to hear if other board members want to have a specific discussion about something that would be more germane in closed session.
Yeah, the idea of the senior administrative staff is quite important at this juncture, and I think that we need to have that discussion. So it's involving other employees, primarily involving other employees other than Dr. Heinz.
Okay.
These employees, this is something, we're going to discuss something about these employees that needs to be done in closed session?
Well, we'll be discussing employees, and I don't know if we necessarily should be discussing that in open because it is individual discussions.
I think if I can lend at least what I think we're going into close for, we're going into close to talk to Lori, and in those discussions, we may hear something that involves other employees of the district that may or may not be of a sensitive nature, and if it's in open, it can't be taken back. If it's in closed, if there's something, if we go into closed and there's nothing there that is too sensitive that we can't come out to open with, I would have no problem if any board member sitting at this table would then want to reveal what we discussed in closed. However, we have a superintendent who is taking a job elsewhere. I have some pretty sensitive questions I'd like to ask her as to, you know, what surrounds the reasoning for leaving, and if, you know, who knows, maybe one of those reasons has to do with,
Can do that in closed?
you know, 10 or 15 or one or none of our current employees. And I would like that to also be sensitive to those employees and not do that in open.
Exactly.
So that's how I see it. And if we go into closed and we hear something that legally we could divulge in open, then you guys as individual board members, you know, have that right to come out of closed and divulge what we spoke about. So that's how I see it. I hope that helps understand, at least when you guys vote, whether you're going to go to closed or not.
Any other comments?
Is that why we're going into closed then? I mean, that was speculation by Tom, which I would agree with. Is that why we're going?
I think Tom put it well. I think he clarified some of the mystical nature that I perhaps put out there. But yeah, we're going to be talking about administrative folks who we need to know of their continual availability.
Which is another thing that I didn't mention. You know, there may be people that are going to leave or are planning on leaving or are planning on not staying, and I don't know if that's something that we can discuss in open since
You can discuss specific employees, their employment, their resignation, their performance, anything related to a specific employee. It's completely appropriate for closed session. We also may move into closed session, and you guys may decide very quickly that this isn't a topic that you want to entertain. We take a motion, we get out, and we move out of closed session.
Right.
So, in my opinion, when I was helping with the agenda, it is typical that this is the first time you've been together since this news has come across. And often the board at least wants to have an initial discussion about the specific employee involved and other specific employees. If we move into closed session and a majority of the board does not want to have this discussion, we simply move out and we move on to the rest of our agenda.
Any other comments or questions? So why don't we get right to it? Bob? Yes. Rick?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, why don't we have limited time. 6:30 is when the close is going to be closed promptly. So we have 20 minutes.
All right.
Are we ready?
Fred Sanchez.
Here. All right. So Tom, go ahead.
Larry Riles.
Here.
Tom Soto's here. Anthony Borelli.
Here.
Rick Biaggi.
Here.
Mark Egeman.
Here.
And Bob Johnson stepped away for a moment. He's here.
All right. And when Bob comes back, we'll announce who is attending the meeting. First, I'd like to reach out there to the few folks in the audience. And again, thank you publicly for showing up for this quite important meeting. The board is back from the closed session where we discussed superintendent resignation under 5 Illinois Compiled Statute 122C1. And during that conversation, we spoke about other positions, some of the reasoning of Dr. Heinz leaving, and some of the concepts of hiring a new superintendent. Though this is a special meeting, we still have IOMA to follow, so I ask for any public comments on items not on the agenda. Not seeing any. Prior to getting into any discussion, are there any comments that any board member would like to make before we begin? And Bob Johnson joins us again. Not hearing any, I ask if Dr. Heinz would like to make a comment.
You know, just that the decision, as my letter stated, and I spoke with each of you by phone Wednesday evening, it was a difficult decision to make. It's been an exciting 5 years here in district, but a real opportunity presented itself to run the second largest elementary district in the state of Illinois, to be the first female superintendent in the district's 72-year history. You know, that was certainly appealing to a woman in leadership. And also to return to where I started my administrative career. I spent 4 years at Winston campus, a very large elementary school. It was 1,350 kids under one roof, and I cut my administrative teeth there. I fondly refer to those years as the baptism by firestorm to my leadership journey, where I've spent, the last 21 years. So, those were, really my primary reasons. It'll be sad to leave the work and the folks, but it's time for a new challenge. So I'm here to assist this board in any way that I can to help find a terrific replacement to continue on finish that last year of the strategic plan and write a new plan that'll take the district, forward for the next 5 years.
All righty. To follow right along that, you've always been difficult to follow right along, but I will try and follow along. To get us to point C from point A, it's traditional that the board engage with a search firm. In speaking with Dr. Martin, he's already created a list of some of the search firms that have a larger presence in the field. Tonight, I'd like the board to consider the firms and, choosing 3, have them come back to the board in January for an interview. Frankly, the last time we went through this, Joel, you recall, we interviewed 6 firms. Both questions and answers became fairly redundant and considerably laborious. I hope to winnow the process. The firm once selected at that January interview will meet as soon as possible to confer with the board and consolidate the decision-making process. Obviously, I'm trying to expedite this early process to give the board the maximum flexibility and timeline in their deliberations and potentially an interview process, along with the extensive community engagement that would entail. We're all aware of the effort put forth by Dr. Martin in creating a tentative timeline, so we have an idea of what that process may look like. Barring no further comments, I turn to Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Borelli. I just want to take a quick 30 seconds before I start, only because it may be the only time I have the opportunity to just take a second as somebody who has worked with Dr. Hines for the past 5 years I want to thank her from the bottom of my heart for her leadership, her expertise, her dedication to the students and staff of District 64. You've been an incredible boss. I don't even like using that word because you've been more of a colleague and a phenomenal leader. I just want to thank you and wish you the best. You've done great things here. Thank you so much. And with that being said, then I'm just going to start by saying, as Tony began, that typically the Board of Education has gone out and hired a search firm to conduct the next superintendent search. As I put in the memo, we are in what is considered typically the second phase of superintendent searches in the school year. By no means are we out of the realm of being able to identify a qualified candidate to replace Dr. Hines. There are typically 3 times you have the individuals who typically announce a retirement or leaving way early in school districts can move to begin those hiring processes in the fall, September, October, and then hire the candidate prior to the holiday season. And then you start the next phase of the superintendent searches, or often in the situation we are in, that begins somewhere right around the holidays and end up in March or April. Again, if you talk to the search firms, they will tell you that is a very normal time frame and that you can find very qualified people for the district. And then the third phase, the one that I don't want to get into, nor does anybody, is when you're in the April and beyond. That becomes a very difficult time to find somebody.
So Joel, when you define the second phase, are we within the second phase, right? I would assume this is when other districts are learning of superintendents
Yes.
leaving, and so this timeline that Tony's proposing is the same, that we've got to get right on selecting the search firm, and once we do that, that still fits into those parameters that you just
Correct.
described.
And,
Yes.
and if we delay this by a
Right.
month, it pushes us down.
Right.
Yep. So obviously, there's always 2 questions that come up. I'm just going to assume for the moment, because I'm going to talk about the search firm, is, go out and go to search or do an interim for a year. The conversation I'm going to have is, regardless at the beginning, is just about what search firms do and what they would offer the district. And it's a little bit of some background for those who are new to what they...
Joel, pardon me, can I hold you down? We're getting an awful lot of echo.
Yeah.
Can you just throttle back on the volume, perhaps?
part of the problem.
Thank you.
That, Dan? Okay.
Please.
Yeah. So what I would like to do is just take about 5-10 minutes at the most and just walk through a little bit of the basic process of what all search firms will do for District 64. They will vary slightly, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Feel free to ask questions, but then I'll have questions for the Board of Education about how they want to move forward in the process. So if we begin just quickly, the basic structure, as I said, all search firms do essentially the same thing. The first process, obviously, is you have to go out and select a firm. I'm going to push that off to the end of the conversation, but they're all going to be able to customize the search for us because every district has different needs and they're going to want to do things differently. The first thing, once you've selected a search firm, so the first thing is you set up a meeting, you interview search firms, you decide who it is. Very quickly after that, when I say quickly, I mean within about a week, because, and I'm going to put the time frame, if we were to do this the first week of January, and then you have the following meeting the next week, you're already, in the process of getting into our first month. But what they're going to do is that second meeting, search firms are going to want to come out and talk to the Board of Education and really nail down what is your time frame, what are your priorities, what are your goals, what are the things that you're looking for them to accomplish, and then they're going to set out to do that. But they want to have that direct meeting with the board and get it directly from you on what is it that you are directing the search firm to do, when are you looking to bring a candidate forward, and what are the priorities that you are tasking them with.
I have a question. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Sure.
Is the same exact process if we go the route of an interim? Are we still looking for a search firm?
Yes, and I'll talk a little bit about at the end, but, and I guess we can do it now. Yes, if we were to go and the board were direct myself or a search firm to go out and find an interim, I would say yes, you still want to have a search firm that's going to go out and find an interim superintendent who would come in. They'll go out and, again, do a search of retirees typically, or individuals who could come in and do it and make sure that they're fully aware of what they're getting themselves into. And what I mean by that is, being an interim, you can't be here every day. Interims can only work 100, or the law may
It's up to 120 now. They just
so sometimes it's really finding an individual who has the ability and working to make sure that they can be in the district as much as we need.
Can I interject, Joel?
Sure.
So one of the big things you're going to need to do, whatever path you go on, is to hire a search firm. The search firm is then going to talk to you. You'll direct them to go out when their first task is either going to be to find an interim or two. Because typically, so for example, the district in which I live right now, there's an interim superintendent. The superintendent left unexpectedly at the end of last year. They put 2 retired superintendents in place. They were each able to work 120 days. They were each paid around $1,200 a day, just so you have a sense of what interim salaries look like, and they were able to make sure that the district was covered. Now, I would say in that particular case, in terms of priorities, we had to get a referendum passed, so they had some big, heavy work to do. So either way, you need to come up with who you want to hire as a search firm, and then, through these next couple of meetings, decide which path you want to.
So I guess that brings me to my next question. The search firm is not necessarily a consultant. Their job is to go find
Right.
So who is going?
Actually, Tommy, if I can answer that, I think a search firm is a consultant.
Well,
they're a consultant in the sense that I think we would rely very heavily on them to help us decide whether we go the route of the hiring process or whether we go toward the route of the temporary for the next year.
Well, and that's what you meant. Well, that's the question I'm asking. Are these search firms qualified to give us advice or are they just a go out and get us employee type of firm?
The search firms are mostly made up of former superintendents. And they will, first of all, and I'm sorry to interject, what they're going to do is, in my opinion, I could be wrong, they're going to say that you can find your superintendent this year, and then they will tell you that the interim option should be left until you decide you haven't been able to, and then they will assist you. Where they provide value with the interims is they know all the interims. These guys pair up in teams. There's a group of them. If you want one person to be here all year, you're going to have to go out of the state.
So again, I think everyone is way ahead of where I am.
Right.
I'm looking for someone to give me the direction, or at least explain to me, Is this a situation where we would want, so you hinted, but
They will
your
they will
attorney
give you
didn't.
that advice. In my opinion, is
So
they
the
will tell
search
you-
firm is more of a consultant than it is just a search firm. So the
Yes.
label search firm is somewhat.
Well, I would say, Tom, they're both. They're going to, as Tony said, they're going to consult with the board, and they're going to walk you through and give you, recommendations on things. They are going to also go out and recruit individuals. They will be searching for a superintendent on the district's behalf.
Again, I think
It's a misnomer.
I'm trying to figure out if should we be looking for a superintendent or should we be looking for a interim? And
They
who's
will
gonna
give you
us that advice.
Tom, they will give you advice on that issue.
Okay, so they're the ones that are qualified to give us that, to explain to us the two different options, explain to us how it affects our district,
Yes.
explain to it which one is better for the district, which one is not, in what situations do you get an interim, in what situations do you not get an interim. These are questions I have, and I don't know if there's anyone at this table that can answer those.
I can, because I've been through it. Joel has been through it. So the long and the short of it is that these folks, when they come in and they provide us with their interview, they will give you a whole pantheon of things that they will provide. And in my experience, the 6 that we interviewed last time, not only were they able to go out because they know the players in the field, but they will walk you through it because they know where the traps are, where the landmines are. They know the pitfalls and the difficulties in recruiting some of these people. So they will absolutely be able to, whomever we pick, and that's the key, we have to pick correctly, but whomever we pick will be able to not only guide us down the path, but select some individuals that we can consider as a board for the position. Joel, please.
No, what I was going to say, Tom, I think to your point specifically, my answer to you would be this. Do we have time to go out and find a superintendent to replace Dr. Hines? The answer is yes. Are we in a position, as we said at the beginning, that we're in where other districts will be, and do we have the opportunity to go out and find a qualified candidate? Yes, we are.
Well, so I'll just, take the elephant out of the room and just tell you why I'm asking.
Sure.
There's going to be 4 new members potentially sitting on this board. Potentially sitting on this board. There's going to be 1 new member for sure, because or there's going to be 2 new members for sure, because Dr. Borelli and Bob, I don't think you're not running, are you, Bob?
No.
So two of the 4 seats are going to be new members no matter what. And then the other 2, might be, it could very well be an entirely 4 new seats. So,
Right.
so the question I'm saying is, if the majority of the board is new,
Yeah.
we as a board might want to consider letting that new board hire the superintendent. Why would I want to hire a superintendent for somebody else for 4 years?
Tom-
Now, I bring that up only, and I don't know if that's the right answer. I'm looking for the person that can answer that for me. I may be way off. I may be wanting to do the right thing, but someone might come up and say to me, superintendents or whatever, interim superintendents are absolutely last option. This is why, and this is how it can hurt the district, or so on. I don't know the answers to that because I've never been in this situation before. So I just wanted to know. Search firms are search/consulting firms, and they will be able to give us the answer as to, is it better to go with a interim, or is it better to try to find our replacement right away?
Well, they could provide advice.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's
your decision.
You guys have to know the
make
answer.
I get, but I can't make that decision without getting some input.
I'm not suggesting
Right, I want
not to,
input, I want
but in the end,
statistics,
it's our decision. And
I get that. In the end, it's always our decision, but we make our decisions based on facts and information given to us. And right now, I don't know which one is better, which one's worse.
Right.
Tom,
and I think to the
Few
question
things
of
to
the,
consider.
and I think to the question of do you wait for another board to be seated? The board evolves all the time. The board changes every 2 years at a minimum.
Right.
So I think you've been charged to be a steward, a fiduciary for the district, and I think we have to bear that responsibility and make the best decision for the future of the district, and not try to wait and pass that on to another group.
And I need somebody.
That's my opinion.
And I need somebody to tell me, or to at least give me some information so I can make that decision.
All right, so
Because
let me-
I don't know if the right decision is for me to make that decision
All right.
with only 6 months left on my term.
Let me jump in here. We're having a discussion on something that's really point Q in the alphabet, and Joel is starting at point A. we don't even know, I know, but you haven't even described a search firm yet. And Tom's question is predicated on basically what is a search firm?
What does a search firm do?
Well,
I mean,
maybe
that's the first, that question is A.
Well,
That question is
that's
A.
his presentation,
you
though.
haven't
That's his
allowed
presentation.
Joel to present.
But I'll jump ahead a little bit. Tom, to your point specifically, search firms can speak to anything you would like them to speak to at the interview process. If that, for example, is a question that the board had directly, and they said, we want you to speak to this when we interview you, to give us advice and to talk about what your experience has been in this situation, they can absolutely do that.
Would you proceed, please?
The last one on this one, during that interview with the Board of Education, they'll also be specifically talking to the board about the salary parameters. What is it that the board, how far up, so to speak, on the salary schedule is the board willing to go for a new hire, so that it gives them a range when looking out and recruiting candidates, what's, who fits into that pool, who would be interested. So that would be something they would want to talk to the board to and establish as quick as possible.
And is that, Joel, is that something, or Tony, is that something that, in sort of the not tipping your hand thing, like when you're buying a piece of property or something, is that something you would typically talk about in a closed session, is how much you're willing to pay from a range perspective?
I mean, usually in my experience, that discussion comes up when you get closer to identifying the candidates, so that, yes, you can move into closed session.
Okay, thank you.
And talk about that, yeah.
Thank you.
No, I'm not having a, sorry, this is not moving forward again. But I'm going to flip to the paper one just to keep us moving while we're doing this. The second thing that the search firms do is they're going to talk to you about building the candidate profile. And there's several things that they do, and this is customizable for all districts. The standard anymore for any district who goes out and does the searches, there will be an electronic survey to everybody in the community. We did this the last time around. They build a number of questions. They're going to go out, they usually give about 2 weeks for people to answer. That's a very standard thing. Last time we had almost 800 families or residents that responded to the survey. They're also going to talk to you about the fact of focus groups. Who is it that the Board of Education would like that these consultants interview? Is it, hey, we would like to have, big open meetings at nights where it's, in a gym and we can invite anybody to come in and they're going to talk about, have people come up and talk about what they're looking for? Is it we'd like a combination with focus groups where, hey, we'd like PTO members, we want to talk to, administrators, board members, teacher leaders, things of that nature. So they'll talk to you what is important, who do you want to hear from specifically, the how, the when, and the why, so to speak. They will put that all together, conduct the online survey, do focus groups in whatever format the board would like, and they're going to put that all together to create a candidate profile, which they will bring back and present to the board and talk about at a regular board meeting.
So I've got a question for Tony. I question the value of a candidate profile, because it seems to me that you can put a whole laundry list of, I'd love the person to be A, B, C, D, E, and F, but that's all fine and good. You're stuck with the candidates you're stuck with. And it would seem to me that you would want input on the back end of that once you know what the pool is, rather than trying to predefine with a bunch of criteria that 800 plus people made up the last time around. So my question to you is more pragmatic or specific. How much did that factor into her selection the last time?
I don't think very much. I think that we were very clear to the individual who was running the search firm. Bob, were you there that time?
I was not on a board. I joined about the same time Dr.
But
Hines.
we were very clear. The board at that time felt that this district needed more than anything a firm hand on the rudder. We needed leadership, somebody who was going to point in the direction that this board or that board wanted to go forward. And so it was clear that they had a mandate to get a strong individual with strong leadership principles. We interviewed a considerable number of individuals, and all of them had had the same concepts. They were all out in front, and they all had some leadership qualities, no question about it. So I think that the profile is nice, but I don't think that's the sole criterion. It really boiled down. At that point, it was quite obvious what we needed. We needed leadership. And so they went out and, they did their composite. But, in talking with us and doing the composite, oftentimes the composite, what you get from the community, may not necessarily be what you're going to get from the people who do this on a more consistent basis.
So I guess my question is, I don't want to buck the trend here, and I certainly am all in favor of having community involvement in this, but it seems like at that point in the game, it doesn't add a lot of value to the decision-making process and to the selection process.
That's what it really is. The profile, at the end of the day, is a culmination of all the input from the different stakeholder groups, your parents, your PTOs. It's almost like the report of what you're getting from all those groups. But I agree, at the end of the day, you're going to get
But you're going to get, from the sports families, you're going to get, I want somebody who's all rah-rah about sports.
you're
From the
right.
SPED family, you're going to get, I want SPED.
I think what you get from the community is you get, how do they want their superintendent to communicate? How do they want their superintendent to act or interact? I think that's what you get from the community. Do you want a more vocal individual? Do you want a less vocal individual?
But here's my concern, and to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, Tom, is that, this board's struggled at times with getting community involved on issues at the appropriate time and getting in front of issues that we sometimes didn't get in front of. So are we going to open ourselves up to allowing all these constituent bodies to give us input? The SPED families want a SPED-focused superintendent, and the sports families want a sports-focused one. And then the board, the 7 of us, or whoever the next 7 is, decides whatever they're going to decide on their own, and to heck with what the community profile said. And I'm curious, again, back to when Dr. Hines was selected, how closely was that, whatever the community profile came back with, did that match up with what the board did, or did the board intuitively know that we needed to select somebody with a steady hand at the helm, and which is what you guys did?
Yeah, I specifically cannot remember the community profile from 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
That's kind of telling to me, you know what I mean? That I think that is speaking to what I'm saying. That I don't want to give a false hope to the community that they're going to have this much involvement.
Because I can't remember it doesn't mean it wasn't important. It just means it was one factor in a months-long process that I can't recall. But I can specifically recall discussions of the board and what the board felt was important to it.
What is the timeline for building this profile and getting it to the firm? Are you talking about this is something we do right away?
It's something they usually try to get moving on very quickly, because to your point, Fred, and I think they're going to be going out there wanting to be recruiting, and they can't be waiting, 2-3 months to get this information. So typically they'll go and do a survey and set up these groups in whatever format the board would like fairly quickly. They try to get moving on that fast. But to the point I said earlier, and to Rick's point, all of these search firms will do whatever the board wants them to do. They'll tailor the questions, they'll tailor the groups. If you want less, they'll want less. If you want to present it in a certain manner, they can, they work for you. They understand that, you're hiring, this is, for lack of a better term, I know it's been said a number of times, your employee, the board's direct employee, they're going to do it the way you want.
I think it's important to point out something that I can't remember, one of you two told me before this meeting started, which is that there's a fee from the firm for recruiting, then there's an a la carte fee for doing the survey, and there's an a la carte fee for doing the blah, blah, blah. And so it's in their best interest to convince us to do this survey or to convince us to do that thing. And I just want to make sure, if we're going to do it, that we're doing it for the right reasons, and that we're not giving false hope to the community that they're getting input in something they may not have input in.
Are we going to be asking them to do this survey during the, I guess my concern is we're going to be asking our constituents to do this survey during the holiday season when they're going to be distracted.
No, this would be, we have to select a search firm first, they have to come out and meet with you. None of that's going to happen until after New Year.
Okay. Right.
And to Rick's point, Rick, I totally get where you're coming from. You don't want one group to dominate the conversation. I think what you're asking is a very reasonable thing to ask the search firm. Mm-hmm. And what do they intend on gaining, and what do they intend on doing with that information, and how much will it create the character of the individual who they're going to bring to the board. So that's probably a question that is 2 jumps ahead.
I agree.
That should be asked of the firms, and it's not something that we should be discussing right now. Simply, none of us know
We're
that
not there
answer.
yet. Right.
Right.
So, Joel?
You haven't had those
No, I
interviews.
think, Larry?
Oh,
I'm sorry, did
Larry?
you have a question?
Did you have something?
I apologize.
I'm probably 2 jumps down.
I'm with you.
My question was simple. Can we do a survey ourselves in District 64 and ask one simple question to the public through our website and our communications and say, what would you like to see in a superintendent? And see what we get for feedback.
Yes, we can always do that. Yep. Sorry, jumped one ahead.
Number 3?
So typically, the search firm will then take your profile, they'll start to advertise the position locally, regionally, nationally. We had a quick conversation prior, I was asked, and Tony and I were talking about, do they really look nationally? Many of these companies, such as BWP, School Exec, Ray and Associates, have connections or have offices in other states. They will go out and actively recruit people from other states. So yes, they do look beyond just the borders of Illinois. Typically, one of the things, for example, that they'll talk about a little bit in closed is, or not closed, with the board, there was a little bit about the profile. For example, would you be comfortable with somebody who is coming from rural Kansas? Do you want somebody who's going to be in a similar district, similar demographic, somebody who has a history that is, familiar with ours? And do you care where that comes from as long as the demographics and their experiences are similar? But they do look regionally, locally, nationally. They are going to look in many of the, they have connections into the different organizations that superintendents and administrators belong to. They'll reach out through those groups, Illinois Principals Association, the associate, and I always...
IASA.
Thank you.
Which is our lead organization,
Yeah.
and AASA is the national one.
And so they will not only advertise, but talk to people in those groups about who are people who, they view as potential candidates. As we said, they'll go out and actively recruit people. One of the things that firms can often do that it's become much more difficult is they can have those very private conversations with somebody about, are you interested, without anybody else knowing, a very closed-door conversation with somebody in another district about, hey, there's an opening here, what's your interest? They can gauge that, and they'll look to see if a person somewhere that they think might be a good fit is actively or is interested or might be interested in applying for that.
Did District 15 have a search firm?
District, which one?
15?
Yes.
Absolutely.
They had a search firm?
BWP.
Same one that placed me here.
Just ask.
Yep. They do reference checks on the candidates, and I want to do a quick caveat in this. Reference checks, not background checks. They'll go out and they do not do the criminal background checks. We do that. They go out and talk to the people, the typical reference checks. They'll do internet checks, things of that nature, but they leave just for the point of the actual, have you been convicted of a crime, that thing up to us, and we do that. And then when they've gone through an interview and recruited people, they'll typically bring somewhere from 5 to 7, depending on the board's preference, people forward to be interviewed by the Board of Education.
We had about 12 last time. I thought there was more than 7, but
Slate is usually 4 to 6 people.
I was going to say, I thought it was around a little over 6. Maybe I'm off. I know it's been 5 years, but we definitely,
It would be a
but
big
regardless.
slate.
I seem to remember more, yeah. But anyway.
Well, to that point, 12, and the headhunter firm, they come in, they provide you a packet on each candidate.
Yes.
Do they provide in that packet the condition of the district that they're leaving?
Typically,
If they're a superintendent or assistant superintendent,
Yeah.
do we get the read-ahead on the condition of that district?
I recall, Larry, and I'm not going to, if it was written down, but I know they specifically talked to the board about each candidate and where they were coming from and the demographics and what their district was like. Because I remember at the time, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Tony, there was wanting to know if they had experience in working in similar like districts as 64. So I know they talked about it. I don't remember, to your specific point, if they talked to that. But again, I think everything's customizable, and you could definitely talk to the search firm about, is that standard, could they do that?
I can recall, Larry, to the extent that I believe you're asking, no.
Say the same thing.
That was not part of it, although I wouldn't be surprised if we asked the search firm to say, the individuals that come forward, we'd like to know the state of the finances of the district, the level of the curriculum of the district, and just 3 or 4 key points to provide us with some background.
Where do they stand academically?
As a measure of the effectiveness of that leadership position. I see where you're going with that, and that's something that we could ask of the group to provide us that with information.
Just to add again, they will do the best they can. They also often, depending on the situation where the superintendent's coming from, will offer site visits where board members can actually go with the finalists and see where they're from, if the finalist is willing to disclose to their current employer.
And we did that with me. Yeah, they did.
John Heidi
And Terry Cameron.
Terry Cameron did
Yep.
that, yeah.
They spent a
but
day in my district.
You'd be limited to 2 board members doing
No,
that at a
actually,
time?
as long
or-
as you guys aren't going to talk to each other about business, you can have more than 2.
Okay.
Like the district I was from, we sent 3 to California.
So what do you mean not talk about business?
Well, an open meeting is only when there's 3 or more of you and you're actually discussing district business.
District
So you would
business.
just have to be
So if you're
observing.
talking about somebody else's district, that's not our business then?
You would be taking notes and observing and then coming back to a meeting to discuss.
Last time, and this is bouncing ahead, but at the last time, 2 board members, myself, Becky Allard, and somebody else, there was 5 of us in total that went to visit the
Yep,
2
it's my
Dr.
district.
Heinz. Yeah.
Did you talk to parents, talk to
Yeah.
teachers,
Talked
talk to
board
administrators,
members.
board
We
members, the
spent
superintendent? Yep.
quite a big chunk of time there.
Yep.
So who pays the search firms?
The district.
The school does. The district does.
Well,
Well, the question could be, does the hired person
the reason
pay
I'm
them
at,
also,
I mean,
or-
Dr. Hines, it's not that simple because, in a recruiting world, sometimes it comes from, the person that is looking for the job pays a portion of their first year salary to I'm just wondering, in this situation, does the superintendent pay anything to these search firms?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No.
So the search firm, so if I was a superintendent and I was out of a job or I was looking for a job, I just reach out to these search firms and say, hey, I'm available, and they kind of put me in their packet of people so that they can present to us so that they can get paid.
No.
I'm trying to figure out how these search firms are, I know they're probably making a lot of money to do what they're doing. It
Right,
can't be
but
cheap.
the reputation of these firms and how they get hired is the fact of placing good people who are going to be typically there, that the boards are happy with, and the longevity of the individuals and the right placement is why people come back and work with these firms. So I think to your point, anybody can contact them and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. I think it is in their best interest to make sure that they're presenting the best candidates to the boards of education.
And Tom, if I could just piggyback, because I've done this now twice. You can reach out to search firms, and some do. Most of us know who works on all of these big search firms at this point. As Tony Luisi said, they're retired superintendents. But part of the process that wasn't identified is we will post this position far and wide. There is an online application that will need to be completed, and then the HR person, so Joel, will begin screening applicants. They grant access to the search firm once one has been selected. They then also begin to do a paper screening, and it's an extensive process of essay writing and reference letters, and you have to write your history and where you've worked and what you've done and so on and so forth. Then they create what's called a slate, whether it's oftentimes based on the profile or what they just know of the district, the informal conversation that they're going to have with the board in terms of what you're looking for, and that's how a slate is presented. Search firms get good reputations when they put 6 or so people that are strong on a slate. A board feels as though they've gotten their money's worth because they've talked to 6 people, most of whom they think could be their superintendent, but they land on one that really resonates with them, and then works in the district and has a good a good run in the district.
So when we're selecting a search firm, we'll get the search firm's their resume, their track record, their history, who they placed, how long they've been there, how that district is doing. I mean, do we, like, back to what Larry's asking,
Yes, they'll tell you, and I know that in conversations with them, many of them are very proud and want to share the fact of how long people have stayed in these districts that they've hired, what is the retention rate, and things of that nature, because that speaks to the fact of that they have made a good match and that it has worked out well for those districts. They want you to know that.
They get their candidates from before I was a lawyer, I was a recruiter for 10 years. That was what I did before law school. And then I sat in Joel's seat for 2 years at a district where we did 4 searches with a search firm while I was there. And then obviously at our law firm, we work with them a lot. Networking, right? They know the people. They're former superintendents. They know who's up and coming. They know who's out there. So they will call and they will network and they'll source and they'll ask people, who should I talk to? As Lori said, you'll get people that respond to your posting. And then you'll also get individuals that just contact them, right, that say, hey, I'm ready to move on from my district. I know that you're the major search firms. Put my name in your pool. One advantage you guys will have right now is that they've collected the pool of the candidates for this year, right, because we're in phase, and so they already have probably a good grasp on who's looking this year because they've already gone through phase 1 of placing.
But to your point, and I didn't get into it, everybody has to fill out an application. Everybody's resume and everything else gets scrutinized. So, for example, if somebody's sitting out there unemployed, there are questions that are asked, and just as we would anybody else, and they're going to have to pass our regular standards, and they're going to have to meet certain criteria to be moved forward. And search firms know this.
And being in phase 2 doesn't necessarily mean we get the second best of the pool. And the reason I ask this is because if someone was just listening to this conversation, they just walked in, it's like, oh, well, they're phase 2, phase 1 already happened, and that they got the pick of the litter. From my understanding, all districts are completely different. So the best candidate for who needed somebody in phase 1 may not have been even on our radar of somebody that we would even have considered, because the district that needed somebody in phase 1 does not match our district at all, or the needs of our district. So I'm just I'm trying to ask that question at the same time, get an answer of, am I correct? It's just because we're in the phase we're in, are we getting the worst of the worst, or should we wait till, is there a best time for a superintendent to be hired? Sometimes it's better to sell your house in the spring than it is in the winter. Is it better to hire a superintendent in the fall? Is it better to hire a superintendent in the summer? Is it better to hire one in January?
Some districts think so, Tom. Some districts want to get out early. A couple this year were out in September, and they wanted to be kind of the first to market and be able to pick in the first wave.
To your point,
but I don't know that it necessarily
there's pros and
matters.
cons to each. For example, the districts who start super early, sometimes you have candidates who don't know if they want to go out. And, it's the start of their year, and they may not be looking for a job, and which makes this a very advantageous time, because some of them have just come to that decision. Or, to your point, many of these things, when you get 2 or 3 really good candidates, it's about who the board likes best. You may have 3 really strong candidates, you like one, the other 2 are very employable, would be great superintendents, they just weren't the right fit for that one. That doesn't mean they wouldn't be the right fit somewhere else. I think that the only thing my advice would be is I think you have to avoid phase 3. But that is the point to me that where we would have problems finding, or I would be concerned about really getting quality candidates.
So to get to prevent phase 3, we need to have guidance. Guidance comes from search firms. So I'd like to expedite your discussion so that we can get to the search firms.
Yeah, and I'll just real quickly, I'll finish super fast, Tony. The board typically will get their slate of finalists. They're going to have interviews. The search firms will help you with that. They'll sit down and talk to you about questions. They'll talk about how you want to hold it. Do you want to do traditional interviews? Do you want the candidates to come and do presentations? I highly recommend writing samples from the boards. We did last time. We had all of the candidates. We gave them a prompt, and they had to come down, or they had to come back and write a essay basically for us. It was about 2-3 pages.
30 minutes. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a real long thing, but it was a legitimate question based on something that was going on in the district.
An angry parent scenario.
Actually,
I remember it well.
Oh, okay. And they will prep the board. They're happy to come out, and they will do mock interviews, whatever the board feels necessary to make sure they're prepared for the set of interviews. They'll help run them. Like I said, assist with the questions. They'll help set it up. Usually takes, depending on the slate of candidates, 2 or 3 days, depending on, and the duration length. When you get the finalists, which is usually 1 to 2, again, as Tony said earlier, they're going to assist in setting up the site visits. We did that with Dr. Hines last time. They will help with any negotiation issues or questions or anything along those lines that we might have. And they'll help with any of the announcements, and whether it be with finalists or throughout the process, they'll come back and talk to the board continually about the process and help in any way that you want. All of that comes at a cost. The range, and I'm going to say where I show the 9 to 17, the 9 is really, I'm going to be honest, there is one search firm, the Illinois Association of School Boards, that give the biggest range. They do kind of a bare bones that comes in at about 9,000. And then every little thing you add on, they'll take you all the way up to about 17,000. Your other search firms are going to tell you right off the bat, it's going to start around 16 to 17,000, and then every little, I shouldn't say every little thing, but a number of things that you want additional are going to be at cost.
I'm sorry,
and that's
sorry to
regard-
be skeptical here, but $17,000 to hire a $180,000, $200,000 employee? No, that's not the bottom. I picked the highest number. 9 to 17 is what it says here. And I went right to 17. I didn't even look at 9.
No, that's
and I got
what-
someone back there going, hey, wait.
Well, no, it's going to depend on the menu.
It depends on, that's kind of the base. Some of these firms, their base starts about there, and then it depends on everything else we add in, and that all comes at a cost.
Joel,
I
you're
can't give you a specific until we know all of what that would be.
Can you tell
I
us how
think
much it
Luann, I was
costs?
just
Can
gonna
you
tell
tell
you.
us how much it costs?
I think it was 14.5. That's what I remember when I checked with
Their
Luann.
base contract with BWP was right about 14,000.
My recollection is...
And you didn't do a lot of other stuff. Yeah, it was below 20. Yeah, it was below 20.
So at the end of the day, we spent less than $20,000 to hire an employee that we hope to spend over $2 million on over a period of time.
That's right. And that's the going rate.
And
That's
that
market.
sounds like a super deal to me, and I don't even know how these people survive. I don't even.
They don't much.
They survive.
They don't make much.
There's
drawing
a
a
lot of
pension.
turnover.
I'm sorry?
They're drawing.
Yeah, I have a question with Mr.
Retired
Biaggi's
superintendent.
first.
This is
Thank you.
just.
Rick?
Is whatever the cost is that we pay, is that whether they place someone or not, or is it tied to actual placement? Is it just, I'm bringing you a slate, now it's 20 grand or whatever, or is it until you place somebody, that's the number? So, for
And I have
instance,
to go back, is there's going to be a fee for the entire process of what they do, because they're going to want to get, at the end of the
Right.
day,
What
if
if
they
we
bring
all say
forward
no?
a number of candidates and the board decides no, they're going to still say, hey, we've done our job.
exactly, that's my point. So then,
You should ask them that.
right, we need to find that out, because if we don't like slate 1 and we go to slate 2.
Actually, I remember quite clearly that the group that we hired for Lori says, I'm going to bring this group to you, and if you don't like this group, we'll bring another group back to you. There was not going to be a cost for that.
Okay.
So at least then, I don't know how it is
Yeah,
now.
well, I will also say, we didn't just take their standard contract the last time. There were, the board had some specific things they wanted. Everything's negotiable. Sure.
Yeah.
As you would. Larry?
Yeah, just to get a perspective here, when you did this last time, you had 12 packets or so, give or take 1 or 2. How many, if you can remember, were existing superintendents from other districts or assistant superintendents?
All of them.
All of them?
On the slate of 6, in which I was one of, I was the only assistant superintendent. The board narrowed it to 6, and I beat out 5 seated soups. I was the only assistant soup. That I remember clearly.
Everybody was either a sitting super or assistant super.
Okay.
So that leads us to, so far we've got some very poignant questions that I hope everybody was go back and to watch this video, because these questions need to be asked of the firms when they come back to interview us. But tonight, I hope to get some specifics on a couple of firms. And Joel, please.
So the basic questions that we're going to need to talk about tonight is, how many companies does the board want to bring forward? I would really like to not leave this room without dates to set those interviews up if possible, and 2 dates. One for the round of bringing candidate or interview search firms, and the second date of when they would come back and specifically talk about specifics with the board, timeframes, so on and so forth. They're going to want to do that, and I think it's important to set that up in advance. They usually want a designated contact person. Last time it was myself and Tony who worked with the search firms. They usually want that, who's the go-to on the daily thing that we need to talk to. And then the other thing that I would say is there's going to be prep work for the board, specifically many of the things we talked about. What are the questions specifically that you want me or whomever the designated person is to talk to the search firms that when you come in, we want you to be able to talk to this. We want answers about this. And part of that is, and I hate to say this because it's the holiday break, I hate to give people homework over that time, but if we select dates right after the new year, which what I would anticipate and hope, we're going to need to also talk about the time frame of when we want those questions so I can get those out to the search firms. So the first question is, how many search firms would we like to see? I sent in the initial memo, at the behalf of Dr. Brawley, I started reaching out to the firms. There were 5 firms, BWP and School Exec. I'm going to stop real quickly with those 2. They're the most prominent and high-profile firms that you see in the northwest suburbs, or maybe, and Tony, you might, in the Chicago metro area. They do the majority of the search by far and away. They are 2 that, at least in my opinion, I would tell the board that they really need to consider. They're the ones that have the greatest network of people. They've done the majority of the searches. They have, to Lori's point, they've established many of the pool of the candidates already.
They were the 2 firms in the 6 positions that were open in Wave 1.
Yeah.
So repeat them for everybody.
Yeah, BWP, they did the search last time that would...
For Lori.
And School Exec Connect. And many of them, we put that on the, BWP, for example, just did District 15, obviously, School Exec Connect, Wilmette 39, Antioch 33, Libertyville 70, Highland Park High School 113. So these are the 2 prominent. BWP has been doing Glenbrook, Lockport, Palos, Benjamin, District 25, Hawthorne, Grays Lake, and Palatine. So they're both very prevalent and doing a large number of searches in our area.
So we have 2 that you're offering. Obviously, they're the big players. We would want them because of their connections and their players in the marketplace. I personally would like to limit the number of interviews that we have coming back. Again, it's my experience last time, many of the questions, many of the informations, it became quite redundant, and I think we don't need to go listening to as many groups because they're going to provide similar informations. I think the more well-founded the group, the more contacts that they have, the deeper into the field that they go, I think they're going to be able to cull a little bit better. Do you have 1 or 2 more?
Rick has a question, so I'm going to...
I can't see her, Rick.
Sorry. Tony, do you, in your experience with your other clients, are there other firms either that are on this list, other than the first 2, are there other firms other than are on this list, or of the other 3 that are on here that you see used or that we should be considering?
First of all, there's nobody excluded from this list that is part of what I call the usual suspects or the main firms. This is all of them.
Okay.
And as Joel pointed out, School Exec Connect and BWP are the major players in our area. After that, IASB, you'll see they're cheap. It's real cheap service, and it's limited in what they do. That's why you'll see them more south of I-80 being used with a lot of our southern districts that don't have as much engagement, don't have as much going on with the search process. HYA is another big firm. You'd want to just look into their experience and their history. And Ray & Associates, I only know them a little bit because they did interview with us at 113, but I do not hear their name
At all.
come up a lot in Illinois. But we did interview them.
So am I correct in stating that kind of the key criteria, other than their objectivity, which I can tell a side story on why I don't want IASB as part of this, but it's their connections. It's their how well connected into the marketplace they are, whatever firm we go.
They
Like
kind of
any
understand
recruiter or
this area,
headhunter,
yeah.
Right.
depending on what industry and how connected are they, how well known are they, and as you can see, which searches are they doing?
Right.
And you can see these two first firms are doing pretty much all the searches
Right.
In this area.
So how does that get juxtaposed with, you talked about advertising the position locally, regionally, nationally. So, we're talking about these search firms that are very focused here. So, why would you even then, if it's all about connections, why would you even look for somebody nationally or even outside of the area then? Because these people won't know them, they won't be, connected. It's a question. I don't know
They
the
do
answer.
searches more than just in Illinois, and there are certain districts, again, like I talked about the district I worked at, they were very adamant that we wanted a national search. We wanted a search of all 50 states. And actually, at the end of the day, it ended up with a candidate from California. So they do have, but most of their ties will be to this area. These superintendents that you'll be working are superintendents that worked in these schools in these areas.
And how does that work? So you advertise the position, applications come in. Do they go to Joel or do they go to these search firms?
When the firm I worked with, it all comes in
They all have
electronically,
access.
and they set up folders.
Right.
And depending on how much access you want to the folders, you'll be able to see those and see everything that comes in. After they phone screen them, vet them, they do interview them in person. I'm sorry.
No, you're answering what I would have said.
So
Then
there are certain districts that I want to see every resume.
So is
There are others that
is
say,
our
"I just
administration
want-"
involved then in trying to screen candidates, or is it just, well, we've got the information, but really we're relying on the consultant to weed those out and to pick who the
It
candidates
depends
should
on
be?
what you want.
Okay.
Like I said, some districts say it's very few, I want to be involved in everything. I want to see every candidate. I want to assign an administrator to help go through it with the consultant. Others say, listen, that's what we're paying you for. Get it down to a manageable number, and then bring that number to us and explore with us very detailed oriented these candidates, and then tell us what we're going to bring back to interview.
And what did you do last time, Joel?
Last time, I was aware of who the candidates were, but they did all of the interviewing and the vetting and then brought them forward to us.
Okay, thanks.
So I think we're back to the fact
List of
Rick's
groups.
question, I think, is you had talked about the main two.
Yeah, and I think Tony answered my question. I mean, not really, right? It's the two, and
Yeah, Hazard
Maybe
and Young,
HYA.
I don't know if they're doing anything. I didn't see anything for this year that they're actively, at least in Illinois. Ray and Associates has one. They're doing
in
Butler
Minnesota, right?
53, and then another one down on the south sides. And as Tony said, the IASB tends to do a lot more in what I consider as Tony said, the more rural areas south of I-80 and then kind of out western part of the state.
I'm fine with school exec and BWP. I'm fine with two organizations. They can bring us all the candidates that we need.
Absolutely.
We don't need to go any further than that.
Only to have three I understand what you're getting, but they will bring some individuality to it, and if for no other reason than looking at a comparison of their presentation might be worthwhile. I have my choices. Last time we had Atia, was one of the groups that came in. Obviously if they're not moving a lot of positions at this point, maybe that's not a good choice now versus 5 years ago. But is there, of those two, and obviously I think those two are the main players, and I would endorse both of them, but is there anybody else on your list that you would have only to compare and contrast the other two individuals that you might recommend, Joel?
Probably not. I think those two are the two main players. I think that, I hate to say this, but I think that at the end of the day, it's going to come down, the board's going to be looking at those two in particular. Based on what I have seen, how much they are out in the marketplace, it seems to me that the top two, BWP and School Exec Connect, are really the big players in the market, and I think those are the two the board wants to look at. I also think the critical thing about this is, your time is valuable. You're going to come in, you're going to interview these people, and you'll want to give them enough time. I wouldn't want also to pack it in, hey, just, and I understand what you're saying, Tony, but I wouldn't want it to say, hey, we're going to limit and cut down presentation to simply get a third in when we really don't think we are going to be going with them. And it's also their time, having them come out and do a presentation, and, you know, when we really don't view them as somebody we really anticipate choosing.
So let me go around the horn, and Bob, what are your feelings? Would the two main players in the market, and Joel's absolutely right, it probably will come down to those two individuals anyway. Are you comfortable with those two? Would you like to see more?
I'm comfortable with the two, and being someone who's, as a profession, does sales presentations and stuff, yeah, it's very disheartening if you were to bring somebody in that you really didn't have an intention to hire, and that they do spend all that time preparing and everything, and then to find out that, you know, they really weren't under consideration. So I think if you know, I think these seem like two strong ones, we should hopefully be able to contrast them and you know, make a decision based on those. So I go for two.
All right, Mark?
I'm also comfortable with two, simply because if they're the main players in the marketplace, then they've obviously got superintendents that are looking to leave, probably reaching out to them, although the others might have, you know, I mean, if I was leaving, I'd be trying to cover all my bases, but I'm sure that the two top ones probably have the most, or the largest pool, so to speak, so that's fine.
Rick?
Yep, I'm fine with the first two. I haven't heard a compelling reason to look at anybody else.
Yeah, my initial thought was to have three, but hearing what the actual involvement is of the other ones in the marketplace, I think we would be better off with two. Tom?
I wouldn't mind having a third.
Like I said, I'm good with the two. I have to believe already that everybody knows that Dr. Heinz is leaving. These headhunter companies know they're already preparing.
Yep.
So those two are fine.
And Fred?
I'm fine with the two. I think it makes sense.
So by consensus, we're going to settle on those two individuals, and I'm going to ask that Joel contact those two companies and set up an interview for the board, which will be conducted in open session. And that interview will be held on a day in January. We need a date.
Tony, are we looking at trying to then interview both firms?
Same day.
Same day, and have an agenda item on, I mean, I'm proposing that it's all in one night.
Yes.
We interview both, agenda item that to make the decision.
That's usually what happens.
Good.
Yeah. In fact, that's exactly, I want to have the interviews and decision that night so that we can expedite the process and bring them back for their consultation
So since we're-
ASAP.
How long are these interviews?
Well, that would be the board's discretion on how long. I would say you're doing no more than an hour. I think most of them, when I talk to them, is about anywhere from 30, I think they prefer about 45 minutes to have, but when I talk to them, I think 30 minutes with presentation and questions is pushing it a little bit for them, but nobody needed more than an hour.
I mean, if we're looking, I mean, I'm just putting this out there. If we're looking to just, they're coming in not with candidates. They're coming in to sell their services to us and sell themselves.
Right.
Is there a reason to wait till January? Can we do this tomorrow or the next day?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't think you could put a firm on that kind of notice.
No, they're just coming to sell themselves. They're already ready. That
Well, but
package.
you don't know if you're getting the right person, you know, I mean, you know, they as a firm, I don't know, I mean, you know, I don't know if it is just one person or something, but, you know, who's going to be the person they're going to assign to this, what's involved?
So when I said tomorrow, it could be the 10 days between Christmas and it could be the 10 days between Christmas and New Year's. Is anyone going out of town at this table?
I am.
Okay, well then, I don't care about you.
I know I don't matter. But
So I'm proposing the earliest that we can do would be either the 9th of January, 8th, 9th of January, 2nd, 3rd might be pushing it, 7th, 8th, or 9th. To have which would be one, to potentially 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, I can't do the 8th or 9th. I could do the 7th.
You can do the 7th. What about doing the 2nd or 3rd, which would be Wednesday or Thursday?
I could do either of those.
Larry can't do that? No. Okay.
Can't either.
So 7th, anybody available on the 7th?
7th works.
7th work.
7th?
My birthday, it's a good
All right. Prior to that, the January 1st, the week of 1st, 2nd, 3rd is out. The only thing that would leave would be the 27th or 28th. That's next week.
Wait, 7th is no good? I'm sorry, I missed that.
No, I'm just looking at
Oh,
options.
oh,
I'm just looking at options. So my first call is, does anybody feel that we need to move on the 27th or 28th? Or can this be delayed until the 7th?
He's
I'm out of
gone.
town, so
Oh, I thought you were, that week? Okay, done.
27th I'm gone.
27th, that week is done. So now it's the 2nd or 3rd. Anybody feel compelled to have this interview that day?
Are you out on the 26th, Rick?
I think Larry
I'm
could
around on the
make it.
26th, not
Oh,
on the 27th.
you're here on the 26th?
Yes.
Is everyone here on the 26th?
No, I'm
The 26th, the day after Christmas.
Hey, man.
But, you know, you have to think of the search firms too, if they're going to be around, if they're traveling, they have
Yeah.
families, you know, you'd be on the board.
pretty
you've got
short
their
notice.
availability.
Superintendents are not going to.
Sorry, but I'm
Joel, is the 7th soon enough to keep on pace for what we need to do? Do we need to
Yeah,
move it up?
because I think the point that somebody just made, I think it's also, this is the time, they're retired, as Tony just said earlier, these are retired superintendents. My guess is that they've also got plans over these, I think, when I spoke to them, I talked about the first week in January being the 7th, about the availability. Everybody said that they could have, people available that week.
So it sounds like the 7th of January would be interview night, and I'm proposing that on the 14th of January, we would have the selected firm come back to us and provide us with a concept with which this board can go forward.
Tony Luisi, can we have contracts and everything signed off within that time frame of 1 week? Is that doable?
Yes, we can do it, yeah.
I would, once you've talked about the 14th, I want to jump back and also talk about the time frame, not only start time, but how much time do you want to give the firms? They're going to ask me, what is the time frame I have to work with? Do you want to give them 45 minutes, an hour? How much time?
I would recommend 50 minutes. Based on the questions that came up here from the board, I think that a 20-minute to 30-minute presentation with a 20 to 30-minute question time.
Are we not letting Tom ask any questions?
Sorry?
Yeah. How are we going to limit
Do you
that?
really think that's going to be enough time?
What was the question?
About how they're going to control the number of questions you have.
No, but I'm just saying for the board, look how much time we're talking right now. So I think, I think I understand there'd be a typical presentation
talking about
time,
the
but just as
14th?
far as questions and answers we have, limiting this board to 20 minutes.
I won't be here on the 14th anyway, so don't worry about it.
Well, it's the 7th.
Seventh is the
Oh, the
critical one.
14th.
Yeah, the 7th is just for the two firms ads.
Yeah, the only thought I have is I'd like to limit their dog and pony show to
Yes.
20 minutes
That's-
max. Like, I don't
That's
need
what they
to see
need to know.
PowerPoint
How long is their
presentations all night
presentation, and
long.
they should designate from 30 minutes to an hour extra to answer questions.
That's why I said 20 minutes for the presentation, good 20 minutes to 30 minutes for question and answer.
So basically, I'm telling them an hour. I don't mean that, they'll have an hour with board time, about 20 minutes to give you.
20 minutes max,
Yeah.
dog and pony, and we're
Yeah,
cutting you
and
off.
then it's going to be interaction and question. Got it.
I still, the 50-minute mark is pretty reasonable, so up to an hour.
Yeah.
And when would you
Wait, are
like
we
to?
talking about selecting the,
This is the interview of the search firms to be conducted on
the 7th?
January 7th.
okay, all right.
What time would you like to start?
6 o'clock, okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
It's the only issue on the agenda.
Special meeting.
So it'll be just 2 interviews and then 1 action item, this the actual selection of.
Exactly.
And I'm assuming there'll be a closed in there somewhere, possibly, or not.
Yes, there will be a close so that we can
I-
discuss the firms.
I'm only asking at some point, we have to build the agenda, so I just want to make
Well,
sure.
let me get consensus.
Doesn't have to be.
now. let me get consensus now because I want us to be prepared and not have this discussion later. So I'm making a proposal that we have some discussion and decision-making process in closed. We can have some discussion in open, but, we'll be talking about some specifics. So I would think that we go into closed at least a portion of it. So, Bob, let me start over here with Fred. Fred, I made a proposal that we include a closed session for that night of the interview.
What would we be talking about in closed that we wouldn't be talking about in open? I guess I'm not trying to envision what information we...
I'm kind of with you. I don't know what we would need to go into closed for.
It seems like we could do this in open.
Just 2 points. Number one, yeah, there's probably not anything, but you never know. And remember, you can go into closed session without it being on your agenda. That decision can be made at any time. It does not have to be on your agenda. So if something does surprise you that night and you feel it's necessary to go into closed session, you make a motion, you make a second, you take a vote, you go in. So you're not barred from going into closed session just because it's not on the agenda.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
There we go.
It's easy.
If that's,
They don't even put it on the agenda.
if that's the case, then we can leave it open-ended, and if somebody feels that you want to go into closed, we can do it that way. Thanks for that fill-in. All right.
14th, what time would you like to start on the 14th?
And on the 14th, what would they be doing?
This is where they're going to be asking you specific questions about, hey, this is how we want to build this process, but they're going to want to get in that, what is the timeline, what are your priorities, the focus groups, all of these type of things that they're going to be asking you to give them direction on what they're going to be doing.
So back my question about being able to negotiate the contract and get that done in time, is the board going to be able to get some homework in advance of that 14th meeting? If we decide on the 7th we're going with X, then on the 8th we're letting them know, and we're going to get a checklist from them to give back to the board to say, all right, here's the 10 things you guys need to think about before the 14th, and then everybody's going to be ready to talk about that.
I think we can clearly, without a doubt, there'll be about, here are the things they want to know about, and, as we said, there'll be some homework for the board, not only for this first one, but for the second one also.
Right.
Well,
You would just want to ask them in advance to send their materials as soon as possible with all the different costing options, and ask them to include in those materials their standard contract so that we can get our hands on that right away and just get the ball rolling.
And once they're selected, too, one of the caveats we could ask them is to expedite the process for the next meeting in preparation. What do you want of us?
Right.
So we could get that by Wednesday or Thursday, almost like a board packet, and we could be working on it over the weekend in preparation for Monday night.
Right.
So that's just one thing to add to the pile. Okay, so we've done quite a bit here. We've established the date of the interview, date of the consultation. Going forward, at that night on the 14th, we'll have to set dates. The fur will start flying at that point because we're going to move fast.
Yeah. The one last thing as a final would be the point that I brought up earlier for the fact of the homework for the first meeting, which is, what is it specifically? Are there things that you would like them to present or talk about and you want them to know about in advance? For example, to Tom's point, do you want them to be, hey, we're letting you know right now, one of the questions is going to be about with board elections, one of them is going to be about, or do you want it to be, hey, we're just going to ask the questions and whatever we ask, so be it.
To answer that, Joel, I think is very critical because you don't want to blindside anybody, and I think that if they know some of this in advance, they could better prepare for it. So I would suggest that board members, if you have questions of things that are on your mind now, certainly things that you would like to have fulfilled on that evening, forward those questions to Joel. And Joel, you might be able to provide them with that list of questions so that they can be prepared and anticipate having answers for them. So would you be able to be the repository of that?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So Rick, Tom, Larry, you voiced some of your thoughts tonight. Please forward them on to Joel, and that way we'll have a more robust discussion because they will be providing some basis for their thinking and their decision-making process. So that's good. Any other thoughts on what we've talked about tonight by anybody? Rick, are you comfortable with this?
Yep.
Mark? Bob?
Yep, I think we got a lot to talk about still.
Oh, yeah. Well, no question about it. Fred, Larry?
Good.
Tom? Good. All right, one final thought by me. We need to set a firm date, now that all this stuff has gone past, firm date for the evaluation, superintendent evaluation. And it's been passed on far too long, so.
Is it necessary to do a superintendent evaluation for a superintendent who is going on to District 15?
Yes.
And I personally would say I would want this board to really consider whether we have to do it or whether we should even do it. I don't think at this point it might even be appropriate. I don't want to do a superintendent evaluation of somebody who's leaving right before we hire another superintendent. I would have zero interest in getting involved in that. So that's just my 2 cents.
So you don't feel obligated or like it would be important to give me any feedback on how I've done this year and anything you want me to work on for the next 6 months? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
You're hearing me say that I because we have to hire a new superintendent, I don't think at this point doing your evaluation would be in our best interest. And we have to think about what's in our best interest.
I want you to think about the fact that board policy states that we have to provide an evaluation. So that being said, pick a date.
I'm going to ask our attorney if we have to do an evaluation.
You guys need to speak up.
Do we have to do an evaluation?
I think we need to go into closed session, and I think we need the superintendent out of the room for this.
I don't know why we need to do that.
I move that we go into closed session. Do I have a second?
Rick?
Second.
Thank you.
Let's take a
It's
vote.
moved and seconded.
Bob?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Just to hear what's going to be said, yes.
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 All right, the consensus is that we go into a short closed session and return to open.
And then I'm going to need 1 minute with Dr. Hines.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. You can have as many minutes as...
All in favor to rescind?
Wait, there's no,
Does he have the camera on? Wait.
there's no vote necessary. If I rescind the vote and the second's rescinded, it's done. I rescind the motion.
All right. Okay, good. Public comments on agenda items.
Hi there, Denise Pearl, and I'm a candidate for the school board, and so I was thinking about this, the situation you're in with hiring a superintendent with Lori leaving. And I think to Tom's point, I wanted to, when I look at decisions, I look at data, and I look at resources, people who know more than I do. Joel certainly expressed some of that with his experience. And data, Lori's search in District 15 took 6 months. The board approved the search committee in June, and then she was hired in December. Related to that, I reached out to Terry Cameron, former board member. Lori mentioned him earlier. He was involved in Lori's search, and he said, Denise, it took almost a year. So just want to be reminded of those timelines, and that has happened. Also, other resources. I work at Maryville University in St. Louis. I work remote. And one of my colleagues, he is a retired superintendent, and he works as a faculty member educating superintendents, and he's also on a school board. So I thought, man, this is a great person to ask. So I said, Keith Kinder, I said, here's the situation that our district's in. What would you do? And so he presented from a lot of different perspectives. And so Keith said, Denise, interestingly enough, our district is involved in a search, and our applications closed December 20th. And he said, we've already lost a few candidates because it's late. And so just want to keep the timeline in mind as we are looking at to do an interim or a permanent superintendent search. So those are a few data points to consider. If the board decides to go with the search, the permanent search, and Tom mentioned this earlier as well, I wonder if there might be at least an introduction. Involvement might be a little tricky because of confidentiality of the candidates, because the board may look very different when the new superintendent comes on board. So just wondering about that, if the board might consider that. And lastly, one last point, I just looked at Skokie School District, I think it's 38. Like just last night, they had a school board evaluation. Like let's do a reflective evaluation. So as we are kind of ending 2018 and starting 2019, I wonder if the board individually and collectively thinks about what behaviors, what mannerisms will help to attract, hire, and retain a quality superintendent for our community. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your work. You have a tough job ahead of you.
Thank you.
When did we January.
Hi all, I'm Carol Salas. So I was going to mention something about Hazard Young, but I guess that's moot now since you're only interviewing 2 of the companies. I just wanted to mention that there was a news article not too long ago about Hazard Young, but since you're not interviewing them, then that's fine. Thanks.
All right. So one thing, I was involved on the interview that you mentioned Terry was involved in. I know that we started in September, and we made our decision by January. And Dr. Heinz started in July. So it wasn't almost a year. By my counts, that's about 5 months.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if Terry said, I could share what he said.
Yeah.
And maybe it felt like you were anticipating. So.
It felt like 2 years, but it wasn't quite that long.
Good point, thank you.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Hines, Dr. Martin, and community members. I'm Dawn Brayton. I'm a teacher at Carpenter School, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Park Ridge Education Association. And we'd just like to remind you that as you work to conduct a search for a new superintendent, your educators ask that we are included in the process and planning and selecting of a new superintendent. So thank you.
Thank you. Another good reason to have such a broad-based community outreach and hearing so many voices, staff in particular, administration. I think even last time we had student responses. So it's quite an undertaking once we get started. All the voices that we hear. Any other comments from the audience? Not seeing any. Thank you for staying and your participation. Appreciate it. Rick, would you like to make your proposal?
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to...
5 Illinois Compiled Statute 122C1.
Is that the
Second.
same?
Second.
Is it the same one for review right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you.
No.
Yes?
Yes.
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 All right. Please. We're back from a closed session where we discussed some of the contract stipulations in the superintendent's contract, and we will, next meeting, we will convene as we spoke on January 7th, starting at 6 p.m., at which time we will be interviewing 2 firms to conduct two firms to present to us. And that evening, not only will we conduct the interviews, but we will select, it is hopeful that we will select one of those firms, and then within 1 week, specifically on the 14th, have that firm come back with a presentation to the board on options for going forward. That is to include positives and negatives and all aspects of the options before the board. With keeping in mind that we have upcoming labor negotiations, keeping in mind that we have an upcoming election, keeping in mind that we will have some board turnover. And all of this will be factored into the whole scenario. So this board will be meeting again on the 7th. Our regular meeting is going to be held on the 28th of January. And we will have more to talk about on that date. Any other comments? Did I miss anything?
Just a reminder, special education subcommittee meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. at Carpenter.
Carpenter, okay, thank you. All right, I'll make a motion to close this meeting, and we will, I won't be at the special ed meeting, but we will gather again on the 7th, and happy holidays to all. Is second?
Second.
Rick has got it, starting with Fred.
Yes.
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 Okay.